The chamber's walls shimmered with the cold glow of the dying blue star beyond. It cast a pallid light over rows of alien delegates seated in crescent tiers, each a silhouette of exotic forms, scaled, feathered, plated, or soft-skinned, yet united by one thing. Every eye was turned toward the lone human seated at the edge of the assembly. Commander Elias Cade sat straight-backed, fingers resting loosely on the smooth obsidian table before him. He neither shifted nor spoke. In the center of the vast hall, a spire of transparent alloy pulsed faintly as it recorded every motion, every vibration of the Council's most significant meeting in a decade. High Chancellor Zyder Varkor rose, his elongated frame unfolded like a mantis, armor-like carapace glinting under the star's cold light. His voice, a layered resonance of two tones, carried effortlessly across the chamber. By majority consensus of this Grand Council, he began, the human species stands accused of destabilizing neutral sectors, hoarding unlicensed weaponry, and refusing to adhere to interstellar trade directives. Our analysts have projected that should war be necessary, their resistance would falter within 6 standard hours. A low ripple of approval passed through the alien delegates. Clicks from the Vrika, soft chittering from the coral, a muted hum from the Chalai cluster. Zyder's gaze shifted to Elias, pupils narrowing to slits. Do you contest this projection, human? Elias met the Chancellor's stare. His eyes were an unremarkable gray, but there was something in them, something that made even the more predatory species hold their breath for a fraction too long. He did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. I am here to observe, High Chancellor, not to contest your arithmetic. A faint, mocking hiss slithered from one of the side tiers. The Zerkath delegation's second-in-command leaned forward, mandibles twitching. Arithmetic? This is not a guess. Human. It is inevitability. Elias offered no response. He shifted his wrist, glancing at the sleek, dark-faced watch class there. The subtle motion was lost on none of them. Zyder extended a spine finger toward the central dais where the Council's decision orb now hovered, displaying the tally. 37 in favor of war. 1 abstention. The matter is settled, the Chancellor declared. Preparations for enforcement begin immediately. This chamber will witness the rapid conclusion of a regrettable, but necessary, conflict. The Council's sigils glowed in affirmation, lines of light flickering like veins across the chamber walls. For most species present, this was closure. They had seen the numbers, read the projections, and believed in them. Elias finally stood. His movements were deliberate, his height modest among the towering alien figures, yet the stillness of his posture commanded a strange kind of focus. Then the Council has chosen its path, he said. Humanity will answer. The delegates leaned closer, eager for a plea, a threat, a crack in the mass of composure. But Elias offered none. His voice remained calm, almost disarmingly so. You've made your calculations, he continued, but you never asked for ours. A ripple of discontent moved through the chamber. The Chalai diplomat, a translucent being with floating sensory nodes, emitted a low hum. Are you suggesting your species welcomes war, Commander? Elias shook his head slightly. No, humanity does not welcome war. We prepare for it. That sentence lingered in the cold air, and for a brief moment, the endless hum of the station's power conduits felt louder than the gathered Council. Zyder leaned forward, claws scraping lightly on the table's edge. Bold words for a race whose fleets number less than 1/10 of ours. Bold predictions, Elias replied evenly, often make for abrupt histories. He did not wait for their rebuttal. Instead, he pressed his hand flat against the table, human protocol for disengagement, and allowed the Council's automated translation to mark his session as closed. As he stepped back, one of the Vrika, an avian diplomat draped in iridescent fiber, called after him, "You'll find no allies here, Terran." The vote was nearly unanimous. Elias paused at the chamber's threshold, a ringed arch that led into the wide corridor of the station. Without turning, he answered, "Unanimity has never stopped the clock." He walked away, boots whispering against the polished floor, while behind him the Council began murmuring in a dozen languages, their confidence tinged with a rare thread of unease. The corridors of the Zerkath Grand Station were immaculate, every panel a study in symmetry. As Elias made his way toward the human delegation's quarters, his comm link vibrated once. A secure pulse, brief and coded. He slipped it from his sleeve and read the single line. Protocol Winter Sun, await signal. He locked the device again, his expression unchanging. The message confirmed what he suspected even before the session began. Earth's patience had limits, and they had been reached. A pair of Chalai attendants scurried past, their bioluminescent bodies leaving faint trails of light in the corridor's sterile air. They averted their gaze. Even here, in a neutral zone, the tension had begun to coalesce like frost on glass. In the observation deck overlooking the blue star, Elias stopped. The dying sun flared weakly, casting the station's hull in brittle silver. War had been declared in all but name. 6 hours, they predicted. 6 hours for humanity to be erased. He touched the glass, as though measuring its chill. 6 hours, he murmured. How generous. Later that cycle, his second-in-command, Lieutenant Ronave, found him in the secure briefing alcove. Her face was drawn, the soft lines of youth hardened by weeks of political charade. "It's done, isn't it?" she asked. "They voted." Elias nodded once. 37-1. "Do we call for reinforcements?" "No," he said. "We wait." She studied him, searching for something beneath the calm. "You expected this." "I did." "Then why attend? Why let them think they're winning?" He glanced at her, his tone a degree softer. "Because letting them believe in their own victory buys us more than threats ever could." Rana frowned. "How much time?" Elias checked his watch again, its face reflecting a faint glimmer of the dying star. "Enough." When the cycle's end bell tolled across the station, a low metallic chime that echoed through every hall, the Council released its formal communiqué. Hostilities authorized, mobilization to commence within 2 planetary rotations. To the galaxy, this meant 6 hours of preparation followed by inevitable conquest. To Elias Cade, it meant something very different. He closed his eyes briefly, exhaled, and walked toward a secure transmission hub. Somewhere far from this cold station, fleets lay in shadows. Somewhere in the void, war had already begun to move. Quietly, precisely, without ceremony. And here, under the dying star's pale gaze, the Council congratulated itself on its victory before the first shot was ever fired. The Zerkath Grand Station shifted into its night cycle. The blue star outside dimmed behind a shielding lattice, bathing the halls in a subdued glow of white and amber. The Council chambers were closed, but the corridors still carried the residue of that day's verdict. Strained glances, hushed exchanges, a subtle realignment of allegiances. Commander Elias Cade moved like a shadow among them, hands clasped behind his back, pace measured. His presence attracted attention. Some avoided his gaze, others watched him openly, as though expecting him to break under the weight of the coming war. He offered neither reaction nor resistance. His destination was a minor delegation hall, an informal cluster where neutral species gathered outside the Council's official lens. The room smelled faintly of resin and charged air. 3 alien envoys awaited him. The insectoid Celari attaché, the crystalline for emissary, and the pale-skinned delegate of the minor Veshka trade union. They had all voted for war, but had the caution to meet him afterward. The Celari clicked its mandibles. "You come seeking sympathy, human?" Elias inclined his head slightly. "I come to speak reason. Sympathy is for species with time to waste." The Four, a being of refracted light, contained within a thin crystalline frame, emitted a sequence of tonal hums before its translator engaged. "Reason does not undo a council vote. The decision stands. You heard the Chancellor." "I heard him," Elias replied. "I also heard the council schedule. You have 2 rotations before fleets mobilize." The Veshka delegate shifted uneasily. Its species thrived on trade routes humanity had quietly protected for decades. "You imply this decision is not final?" Elias studied each of them in turn. "Decisions are only final when consequences arrive. Until then, they're posturing." The Celari hissed. "Your kind overestimates its influence. Your fleets are scattered, your colonies thin. The Chancellor will make an example of you." Elias let the remark settle. "Perhaps, but ask yourselves, what does an example cost?" The room fell quiet. The forest surface caught the room's low light, scattering across the walls like splintered stars. "What are you suggesting, Commander?" it asked. Elias stepped closer, voice low, calm. "I'm suggesting the Zerkath believe they can erase us in 6 hours. I suggest their analysts built that prediction on faulty assumptions. And I suggest you reconsider where you stand when those assumptions collapse." He turned to leave without waiting for their response. The conversation had served its purpose, not persuasion, but doubt. Doubt was more durable than any plea. Later, in the human delegation's quarters, Lieutenant Ronave waited by the comms panel. The walls here were bare compared to the ornate chambers of other species, a deliberate choice. Simplicity revealed nothing. "The neutral envoys?" she asked as he entered. "They'll hesitate now," Elias said. "Hesitation buys time." She activated a holographic map, its lines flickering with zones of control and marked fleet movements. "Time for what?" "Reinforcements won't reach us here." "Reinforcements aren't the point," Elias replied. She frowned, tracing a finger along the contested sectors near human space. The Chancellor broadcast the mobilization orders. "They're confident enough to do it openly." "Confidence isn't strength," Elias said. "It's camouflage." The comm link pulsed again, a narrow encrypted beam threading to the Council's network, untraceable to the untrained eye. Elias opened it, scanning the single line. "Protocol Winter Sun confirmed. Await final trigger." He closed the channel. His face betrayed nothing, but the faint tension in his jaw was new. "Earth has decided?" Rana asked, catching the signal's brevity. "They decided long before this meeting," Elias said quietly. "This was never about debate. This was a clock." The following rotation, the Council reopened for procedural matters. Delegates discussed fleet staging, supply requisitions, and public messaging for their homeworlds. The war had not yet begun, but its language had already taken root. Sterile terms for violent intent. Elias attended, seated at the same obsidian table. He spoke rarely, listening as the Chancellor outlined the first phase, a rapid strike on human frontier colonies, then a coordinated push toward Sol. Their strategy assumed human retreat, fragmented resistance, and eventual surrender. Zyder gestured with one spine arm, his voice carrying its usual dual resonance. "We will strike their relay hubs first. Their outer sectors will fall in ours. From there, the route to their homeworld is open." Several delegates expressed approval. Others inquired about reparations and redistribution of captured infrastructure. It was less a council now than a feeding circle. When Elias was given the floor, he stood slowly. "The council prepares for a short war," he said. "You may even believe it will be bloodless, swift, clinical, inevitable." A murmur of discontent rippled through the chamber. The Chancellor's pupils narrowed. "Are you here to lecture us, Commander, or to accept your fate?" Elias met his gaze. "Neither. I'm here to remind you. Inevitability is a story told by victors, and you have not yet earned that title." Before anyone could respond, he added, "Humanity has already prepared its answer. You may not like its shape." He deactivated his mic and sat. The translation lingers hung in the air like static, sharper than any direct threat. That evening, the corridors buzzed with movement, messengers, encrypted couriers, minor species whispering about the humans' cryptic remarks. Fear had not set in, but a shadow of it had begun to stretch. Rana joined Elias at the observation deck once more. The blue stars' waning light made their reflections ghost-like against the glass. "They think you're bluffing," she said. "Good," Elias replied. "When do we move?" "When they believe they've won. That could be in hours." "Exactly." She leaned on the railing, studying the dark void beyond the lattice. "You don't seem troubled." "I am," he said, almost himself. "But trouble doesn't change the plan." By the close of the second rotation, the Council issued its formal war declaration. Hostilities authorized, fleets to depart at first light. The message carried across the galaxy with ceremonial precision. Elias received it in silence. The chamber around him erupted in controlled chaos. Delegates relaying orders, aides rushing to secure documents, the Chancellor surrounded by a flurry of advisors. He checked his watch. The faintest of smiles touched his lips. 2 hours, he murmured, and the clock starts. The war declaration spread across the station like a control burn. Cold, calculated, unstoppable. Fleet manifests lit the Council's data lattice. Each note a promise of destruction. Carriers reoriented. Supply convoys rerouted, and the first waves of propaganda rolled out. The human anomaly will end. Commander Elias Cade watched the cascade unfold from the human delegation's secure chamber. No outrage, no panic. Only a slow breath as he adjusted his cuff and opened the private transmission line. The encoded signal blinked once, then vanished into a pattern of meaningless pulses. Lieutenant Rana Vey stood by the entrance, jaw tight. That's it then. They've committed everything. Not yet, Elias said. Commitment begins when they believe we've broken. She stepped closer, voice lower. And you're certain they will? Elias finally looked at her. Certainty isn't required. Preparation is. The council convened for its final session before hostilities commenced. The chamber was a theater of triumph. Delegates exchanged clipped nods, already dividing the spoils of a war that hadn't begun. High Chancellor Zyder Varkor presided from the central dais. His mandibles parted in a predatory semblance of a smile. The fleets are aligned, Zyder announced, his dual-toned voice carrying over the assembly. At first light, the human frontier will collapse. Their relay hubs will be ash. Their colonies will scatter like dust. We will end this within hours. A surge of affirmation filled the hall. Clicks, hums, vibrations resonating through layered atmospherics. The council believed in its prediction as if it were a natural law. Elias rose when addressed. You will speak now, human, and your words will be entered into record, the chancellor intoned. Elias stepped forward, hands at his sides. The obsidian floor reflected the cold halo of the star above, and his shadow stretched in behind him. You believe the war will end before your star dips twice, he said, voice steady. Perhaps it will. Perhaps not in the way you think. Murmurs rippled. The Zerkath envoy 2 rows above clicked its mandibles sharply. Threats are not tolerated, Terran. Nor are delusions, Elias replied. I will speak plain. Humanity will not start this war, but you will not finish it. The Chaelai cluster, always curious, emitted a questioning hum. Are you saying your people intend to resist to extinction? I'm saying extinction was never our plan, Elias said, and with that he activated the transmission key hidden within his sleeve. To the council, it was a trivial movement, an impatient gesture. To humanity's scattered fleets, it was a signal they had waited for. Winter sun is lit. Execute. Far from the council station, in the silent corridors of interstellar dark, dozens of human strike groups awakened. They had been still for weeks, hidden in debris fields, beneath electromagnetic interference, in the blind spots of Zerkath patrol routes. Cargo ships shed their disguises to reveal magnetic rail platforms. Mining rigs folded into launch silos. War had not started here. It had started the moment the council underestimated how far humans would go to avoid surprise. Within 30 minutes, the first relays fell. FTL nodes that kept the council's armadas in perfect sync shattered in sudden kinetic impacts. Command lines went dark. Outer supply chains burned without a single warning broadcast. Back in the council chamber, a low chime interrupted the chancellor's address. His aide leaned in, whispering urgent data across his neural spines. Zyder's mandibles twitched. Speak, he commanded. Minor network anomalies. High Chancellor. Some relays unresponsive. Minor. Zyder hissed. Restore them. But as more reports filtered through, the map in the chamber's air shifted. First a single red line, then 5, then entire sectors blinking out of sequence. Delegates exchanged uneasy looks. Elias stood still, watching the lattice dim piece by piece. Your 6 hours are bleeding, he said softly. The remark drew immediate hostility. The Vrika diplomat slammed a claw against its stand. You cause this. Sabotage, cowardice. Sabotage. Elias arched a brow. What you see is preparation. We prepared because you told us we would fall. We listened. The session dissolved into chaos. Orders crackled across comlinks. Translators struggled to keep pace with overlapping shouts. Zyther barked commands in his native tongue, the sound harsh and metallic. Seal the station. Detain the human delegation. Security drones began to move, their sensor arrays locking onto Elias and Rana as they stepped backward toward the corridor. Do not resist. One droned, its tone cold, procedural. Elias raised his hands. We are diplomats, he said. We have resisted nothing. But resistance was no longer a question. Across the Council's own territories, human forces were dismantling the infrastructure that gave this alliance its reach. Rana fell into step beside him as the guards escorted them through the labyrinthine halls. How much damage can we do before they realize it's irreversible? She whispered. Enough to collapse their timetable, Elias replied. Enough to make their 6 hours meaningless. And after that, they will want minutes. When they were confined to their quarters under guise of protective custody, Elias opened a secure terminal embedded in the wall. The Council thought they had disabled human communications, an assumption built on their own protocols. Humanity had built others. He transmitted a single phrase to the fleet. Phase 2, advance of discretion. No grand speeches. No declarations of vengeance. Just a sequence of steps prepared long before the Council ever voted. That night, the station trembled faintly as distant shock waves rippled through its extended docks. Emergency lights flickered in one corridor, then another. Delegates whispered behind sealed doors. Some blamed human treachery. Others quietly began to wonder how many of their own secrets humanity had mapped while they debated and boasted. Elias sat in the dim light, hands folded, listening to the subtle shift in the station's rhythm. They'll react soon, Rana said from across the room. They already have, he replied. What you're hearing is them realizing the difference between declaring a war and surviving one. She studied him for a long moment. Do we have their attention? We have their clock, he said. The rest follows. By dawn cycle, the Council's secure channels were flooded with conflicting reports. Lost fleets, crippled communications, supply lines cut like threads in cold vacuum. The war they promised would last hours had not yet begun an open battle, and already their advantage was leaking away. Elias adjusted his watch again. 3 hours left, he murmured. Plenty of time. The Zerkat Grand Station woke to alarms that did not belong to drills. Crimson lines streaked across the holographic map above the Council's core chamber. Entire sectors marked in silence. Relay hubs had gone dark. Logistics yards flickered out of communication, and outer fleet formations were collapsing into scattered fragments. High Chancellor Zyther Varkor stood at the center, his spines rigid with disbelief. Report, he demanded, his voice resonating in the tense air. A Chalai officer answered, its form flickering as its relay failed mid-transmission. Multiple sectors compromised, no transmissions from the Velth corridor, no updates from the Heroin gates. The feed died. Zyther turned sharply to the counselors. This is sabotage. They cannot move this quickly without allies. From the side tiers, the Vrikad delegate snapped, its avian crest bristling. You assured us the human network was fragile. It is, Zyther snarled, but they have struck from within our peripheries. Someone gave them paths. Across the chamber, Elias Cade sat with his hands folded, expression calm as if observing a weather report. He did not speak yet. The chaos would speak louder. The station's corridors echoed with hurried steps. Drones sealed bulkheads. Aides whispered into encrypted links that no longer reached their destinations. The proud lattice that held the Council's strength together was unraveling in real time. Lieutenant Rana Vey entered the human quarters with a silent urgency. Outer docks are reporting chain detonations, she said. Unmanned, mostly. But their response time is collapsing. Good, Elias replied, standing. The longer they look for a front line, the less they see the field. She hesitated. Do we reveal the terms now? Elias shook his head. Not until they ask for them. By the second hour of the war, human strikes had erased 3 of the Council's largest FDL corridors. Supply convoys stranded mid-space became silent monuments to a war they had expected to last hours in their favor. Human fleets, small and deliberate, move not to occupy but to sever logistics, relays, command relays first, weapons only when needed. The Grand Station felt the weight of isolation for the first time in a century. The Chancellor finally called on the human delegation. The chamber had lost its earlier smugness. Now, its delegates leaned forward, voices quieter, questions sharper. "Commander Cade," Zyther said, his tone clipped, "you will explain how your kind breached council space." Elias rose slowly. "Breached? No. We move along the lines you left unguarded." "Impossible," barked the Cellari envoy. "Our charts were predictable," Elias interrupted. "You measure strength by size, by number, by how bright a fleet burns in the dark. We learn to measure it by where no one looks." The words hung in the chamber like a low charge. "You planned this before we voted," Zyther accused. "We prepared for what you would choose," Elias corrected. Outside the chamber, the war turned from projections to events. Council fleets that had assembled for a forward assault found themselves blind. Communications relays failed in sequence, leaving admirals stranded with outdated orders. Attempts to regroup were met with targeted kinetic strikes, fast, silent impacts that crippled without warning. Rana stood beside Elias as new data scrolled across the human secure display. "They're trying to reroute through the Mornex corridor," she noted. "They won't reach it," he said. "The satellites there have been inert for weeks." "Weeks?" she asked, glancing at him. Elias only adjusted his cuff. "A war isn't fought when the first shot is fired. It's fought when the last opportunity to stop it is missed." The council, cornered by its own predictions, began issuing fragmented orders. Some delegates demanded immediate retaliation on human colonies. Others quietly asked for negotiation corridors. Zyther still refused. His carapace gleamed under the harsh light as he struck the table with a spined fist. "We will not negotiate with saboteurs. We will crush them before this day ends." Elias finally spoke. "You wanted hours, Chancellor. Look at your map. How many are left?" Minutes later, the station shook. Not from a direct hit. No fleet dared assault the Council's heart, but from its own emergency lockdown systems sealing sectors to contain the spreading chaos. Supply bays went dark. Communications relays rerouted through unstable nodes. For the first time, the Council's networked empire felt the stillness of being cut off from itself. Rana approached. "The outer rings are evacuating non-essential staff. They're preparing for internal collapse." "Then they're thinking clearly at last," Elias said. As the third hour closed, a delegation of minor species requested an emergency private meeting with the human envoy. The Veshka, once eager to profit from human defeat, now spoke with a lower voice. "If you can end this, how far will you go?" Elias regarded the delegate for a long moment, far enough that you remember the price of arrogance. "And after we talk of peace," he said, "but not until you understand why it matters." The council chamber dimmed as its primary lattice failed for the first time in recorded memory. Only auxiliary lights flickered now, long shadows stretching over the ornate pillars. Zyther sat rigid, mandibles flexing as aides brought him fragmentary reports. "They hit the Nexus foundries. The Halver Gate is gone. The supply fleet from Eurus never left dock." The words blended into a single truth. Control had been an illusion. Elias remained at his seat, silent. Patience was a weapon now, sharper than any fleet. By the end of the fourth hour, the first official request for negotiation was logged. Not from the Chancellor, but from two mid-tier members of the Council bloc. Their message was simple. "What do you want?" Rana read it aloud. "That's it? No demands, just a question." Elias exhaled slowly. "Good. The question matters more than the terms. It means they're ready to listen." He returned to the chamber one final time that cycle. The delegates were fewer now. Many had retreated to private quarters or open channels, trying to salvage fragments of their power. "Chancellor," Elias said, "your clock is gone. The longer you hold this posture, the deeper your losses become." Zyther glared, the sheen on his carapace dulled by strain. "You think this is victory?" "No," Elias said, "This is the opening move. Victory comes when you stop pretending you still have time." The war, promised to last hours, had become a series of minutes stretched thin with silence and fire. Across the stars, Council fleets floated stranded, their threats reduced to static. Humanity had not fired the first shot in the chamber's view, but everywhere else, they had already fired enough. Elias checked his watch. 2 hours remained until the Council's predicted end of humanity. He closed the display. "Plenty left," he murmured. The Council chamber no longer carried its old voice. What had once been a hall of echoes and proclamations now whispered with controlled breaths. The overhead lattice, once alive with star maps and lines of dominance, flickered weakly, showing only scattered fragments of a disassembled empire. Chancellor Zydavarkor sat forward, his carapace dulled under low emergency lights. The spines along his back no longer flared. They lay flat, resigned. Delegates who had mocked humanity days ago, no, hours ago, now avoided eye contact. Elias Cade entered without a guard, the steady stride of a man who needed none. Lieutenant Ronave remained at his side, her expression still, her eyes sharp enough to read every movement in the room. "You asked for terms," Elias said, voice calm, almost conversational. "I'm here to deliver them. No ceremonial greetings, no preambles." The human diplomat placed a slim black case on the council table. Its surface reflected the hollowed faces of those who had once ruled half the known stars. "We do not recognize your authority to dictate them," Zyder said, but there was no force behind the statement. Elias pressed a control. The holographic map surged to life. Not the council's grand network, but a human reconstruction. Lines marked in red where corridors had been severed, that's indicating abandoned fleets, blinking voids where nothing transmitted anymore. "Authority is not the word," Elias replied. "This is reality. And reality does not ask permission." Rana distributed the terms on translucent sheets. No one reached for them at first. "You will withdraw from the Terran border sectors." Elias began. Immediately. Not in negotiation. Not in phases. Now. A delegate from the Cellari faction hissed. Feathers bristling. "You think you can hold what you've cut?" "We don't need to hold it," Elias said. "We only needed to remove your reach." "And the occupied colonies?" the Veshka envoy asked quietly. "Evacuate them. Leave the infrastructure intact. Humanity will decide what stays." Zyder's mandibles flexed as he stared at the map. "You will not keep this dominance. Others will rise against you for this humiliation." Elias stepped closer, voice still level. "Dominance? No, we're not asking you to kneel. We're asking you to step back before the ground collapses beneath you. And if we refuse, then what's left of your fleets will keep drifting," Elias said, "until your outer sectors starve, your trade partners abandon you, and your own citizens wonder why you started a war you could not even finish." The chamber fell into a low murmur. Delegates whispered, their tone stripped of ceremony. They asked for time to discuss, but none dared say it aloud. Rana leaned toward Elias. "They're calculating losses," she murmured. "Good," he said. "Let them see the cost before they imagine the alternative." Outside, the Grand Station's corridors were silent. No more alarms, only the low hum of life support systems conserving power. Human operatives had already begun pulling their data caches. Their mission was almost done, not to conquer, but to leave the council staring at its own reflection. Zyder finally spoke again. His voice was hoarse, the arrogance stripped to a thin layer of formality. "You claimed victory, yet you did not fight us in open war. You struck at our spine in the dark." Elias met his gaze. "You declared the rules. We played the board. If you wanted honor, you should have offered it before you promised to erase us." The words were not cruel. They were simply true. The terms continued. No reparations demanded. No territorial annexations outside the attack corridors. Monitoring rights for 5 cycles to ensure no immediate retaliation. "We are not here to carve an empire," Elias said, watching their reactions. "We are here to make sure yours remembers the limits of its own reach." The Vrika envoy raised a narrow wing. "And if others rise? If this weakness you've exposed becomes an invitation?" Elias almost smiled. Then they'll find the paths are still closed. Hours pass in low negotiation, no longer about resistance, but about phrasing, about what the council could say to its people to save a fragment of dignity. By the end of the 6th hour, their signatures appeared one by one across the agreement. Zyder signed last, his hand trembling not from fear, but from the weight of what he'd lost without ever meeting the enemy in open combat. Rana watched the seal form on the projection. "That's it," she asked quietly. "That's the war they wanted," Elias replied. They imagined it would roar. Instead, it whispered. The chamber doors opened for the last time that cycle. Human envoys left without ceremony, their steps echoing to the grand halls that would soon return to politics, trade disputes, and quiet resentment. Behind them, the council sat in their dim chamber, not broken, but marked, reminded that their clock was not the only one that mattered. Aboard the human vessel Kestrel's Oath, Elias stood by the viewport as the grand station shrank behind them. Its proud silhouette still hung in the void, lights flickering like embers. Rana joined him, folding her arms. "Do you think they'll come back?" "Of course," he said. "But next time, they'll remember how long minutes can last. We didn't destroy them. We didn't need to. We only needed them to see that war isn't a storm. It's a choice. And sometimes, the quietest choice leaves the deepest scar." Messages began streaming back from Terran command. Colonies were intact. Supply lanes were clear. Human fleets were already standing down, ready to fade back into the void that had shielded them. Elias looked once more at the shrinking council station. "They predicted our defeat in hours," he said softly. "We taught them what an hour can cost." Rana gave a thin, weary smile. "And what do we call this?" He turned from the glass. "Survival. The only kind that lasts." In the cold dark beyond the station's reach, human ships vanished one by one into folded space. They left no banners, no monuments, only the silent paths they carved, and the echo of a war that ended not with a battle, but with a pause.